Hello, welcome to Echoes of Tomorrow. My name is Marsu Wortham. Mission here is to look at prophecy, specifically Revelation, through the lens of history. This is known as Historicism eschatology. So in our very first video, we went directly to Revelation chapter 3, the admonition to the seventh church, our era, the Laodicean. We are counseled to buy gold tried in fire. And we concluded that the gold tried in fire is truth, sound doctrine. We verified our conclusion using 1 Corinthians 3:12 through 24, where Paul tells us that Christ is our foundation and we are to build upon this foundation. Expanding on the idea of building, Paul then speaks of various building materials and what happens when they're subjected to fire. The analogy here is our beliefs and actions will be subject to fires. Fires of trials, fires of judgment. The foundation built upon Christ and truth, the gold, withstands the purging of the fire. The foundation built upon human philosophy and faulty instruction, the wood, hay, stubble will not. Echoes of Tomorrow hopes to build with gold. We also endeavor here to examine the dominant existing beliefs embraced by most denominations. The most popular fall into two ideologies, Dispensationalism and Supersessionism. But Yahweh left to us a love letter of encouragement, direction, and reassurances. And being the poet that he is, and having to relay esoteric ideas to us on abstracts such as love and holiness, law, he employs the use of symbols to communicate with us. We already mentioned that gold is truth, something precious. Fire, trial, judgment. And fortunately for us, he uses his writings to cipher the symbols for us. The Bible is its own expositor. So how do we do this? Take, for instance, the word or symbol grass. In one part of Revelation, a third of the grass is destroyed. So what do? We look for the word grass everywhere, Old Testament, New Testament, and we look for the commonality. So I'm going to give this one away. Grass is man. Isaiah 47 says, surely the people is grass. 1 Peter 1:24, all flesh is grass. Try this for yourself. It's quite cool. So in our videos, we've been talking about other symbols without going into a whole lot of substantiation. But there'll be symbols we'll be going over time and time again. We encourage you to do your own research because we are told to study to show ourselves approved. So let's do a quick review of some of the symbols that we've mentioned in previous videos. In Who is Israel? Israel is always Yahweh's beloved, originally existing as a tangible nation and more contemporarily the church. A woman, so Yahweh's beloved and the church. Some symbols can have more representation, more than one representation. The wilderness, a period of correction, a period of testing and or instruction. Beasts, kingdoms, powers. And Satan is represented in many forms. This is serpent, dragon, beast, pagan Rome. So as promised in our earlier short video, as an introduction to today's study, we're going to reveal the symbolism of stars. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? But this symbol is often misinterpreted. So a proper study of the representation of stars reveals that stars are always symbolizing Yah's people. So get your pencils out because I'm going to give you some quick scriptures. I'm not going to read them to substantiate this. Just a few. First Chronicles 27:23, Nehemiah 9:23, Daniel 12:3, Hebrews 11:12. These are beautiful scriptures with uplifting symbolism of how Yahweh exalts his people. We believers are stars. And in today's study, we're going to look closely at the symbolism of heaven. I'm challenging you today to put all assumptions aside of what you believe you know about heaven. In truth, an extrapolation of the word heaven will reveal that heaven is a representation of three things. Heaven is paradise, where Yahweh resides. Heaven is a place in the celestial, and heaven is on earth. In a continuation of our study in the wilderness, women in the wilderness in Revelation 12, we're going to do a quick review of some of the symbols that we have used before. Woman, of course, being the church. Wilderness, period of correction, testing, judgment. Stars, Yah's people. Heaven, paradise, celestial or earth. Dragon, Satan. Revelation 12:1 says the woman appears in heaven, but which heaven? All right, let's look at this. We know that the woman represents the church. Is the church in paradise or in the celestial heaven? No, the church is here on earth. Remember, we learned that the stars are Yah's people? Are his people in paradise? Oh no. Or in the celestial heaven? No, his people are the believers here on earth. She is also about to give birth, and the dragon ominously awaits to devour the child. Where was Christ born? Here on earth. And let's not forget to include in our study verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. We can safely conclude that this scene in Revelation 12 is on the earth. Before I continue, remember I said that Echoes of Tomorrow also strives to analyze prevailing beliefs that may be gold or the sort for wood, hay, and stubble. In the study of Revelation, it must be concluded, it may be mentioned that a popular interpretation believes that the setting conflict between the woman and the dragon takes place in the celestial realm, which is the dispensationalist interpretation of heaven here. But we had just established that the setting in Revelation 12 is on earth. The chapter is about the ongoing war between Satan and the church. The battle, then, here is on earth, for it is for the heavenly places, the high places, places of ruling. Let's try to understand that a little bit more. We can use Ephesians 12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. When Christ came to earth, he declared the kingdom was at hand. In our study of the kingdom at hand, we proved that Christ meant Yah's kingdom would no longer be confined to one nation, Israel proper, but would be going out to a multitude of nations. The spreading of the gospel was the kingdom at hand. As his truth spread throughout the world, it eradicated the prevailing paganism. Satan was cast down, meaning that worship no longer went to him through pagan practices. But he continues to strive to obtain the worship once afforded him through those false systems of worship. So what we have here is a fulfillment of Zechariah 13, verses 1 and 2. In that day shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to pass out of the land. In its most simplistic interpretation, Revelation 12 is about Yeshua's appearance in the history of Yahweh's people, Israel, the church, the woman, the stars, and Satan's attempts at usurpation of Yeshua's worship through attacks on the church. He still works to infiltrate and disrupt the church today. So here's Jerry to give some meat to the continuation on our study of the woman in the wilderness.
Welcome to Echoes of Tomorrow. In today's video, we're going to be dealing with interpreting the sun, moon, and stars in Revelation chapter 12, in particular the stars. Revelation 12, verses 3 through 5, we read, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all the nations with the rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne." Both dispensationalists and supersessionists recognize the man-child represents Christ, and we agree. And both recognize the sun, moon, and stars are symbolic of the Old Covenant people. Supersessionist J. Rogers holds the correct interpretation of the sun, moon, and stars. In one of his publications online, we read, "The symbols of the sun, the moon, and the stars refer back to Joseph's dream in Genesis 37, verse 9. Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." The 11 stars here, of course, are Joseph's brothers. The sun and the moon could be interpreted to be his father and mother. Abraham's descendants are as numerous as the stars. There are numerous references to the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, to the stars as God's covenant people. Genesis 15:5, 22:17, 26:4, 37:9, and in Exodus 32:13, and in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 10, 10:22, 28:62, and in Judges 5:20, First Chronicles chapter 27, verse 23, Nehemiah 9:23, and Daniel 8:10 and 12:3. This is once again from J. Roberts' publication online, Revelation chapter 12 in the preterist perspective. Dispensational John Wilvert also views the stars as God's covenant people. In one of his citations, we read, "The stars represent the patriarchs, the sons of Jacob. The 12 stars seem to refer to the 12 tribes." This is from John Wilvert and his The Revelation of Jesus Christ found online. In verse 9 of Revelation 12, we read that the dragon is a symbol of Satan or the devil. But as Marceau revealed in the apocalyptic genre, beasts depict kingdoms. Supersessionists interpret the dragon as the ancient Roman Empire from the book of Daniel. Again, citing from Rogers, we quote, "The dragon is represented by the imperial armies of Rome under Nero." Once again from J. Rogers' publication on Revelation chapter 12. In Daniel chapter 7, we find that the dragon as the ancient Roman Empire. Now, Daniel chapter 7, we read verse 7, and in verse 7 we read, "After this I saw at a night vision, and behold, the fourth beast, a dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. And he devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns." This is how we determine the dragon is a representation of the fourth beast in Daniel or the Roman Empire. Verse 3, as we read in Revelation chapter 12, the red dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns, which is what what makes it the fourth beast, diverse from all the others in Daniel chapter 7. In verse 4, we read that the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered to devour her child as soon as it was born. Once again, we saw that this represents Christ, which is accepted by the major interpreters. And historically, Herod was appointed by pagan Rome, and he tried to kill Christ before he was born. Ancient Rome fulfills the symbolism of the dragon. So supersessionists are correct in their interpretation of the dragon is a symbol of the ancient Roman Empire as well as the devil, in accordance with Daniel's use of the beasts as symbols of kingdoms. The symbol of the 10 horns and the dragon's exaltation before Christ connects it to the ancient Roman Empire in the 1st century. Now, dispensationalist John Walvoord connects the dragon to the ancient Roman Empire also, citing from Walvoord again, quote, "The dragon is seen awaiting the birth of the child with the intent to destroy it as soon as it was born. The allusion here is unmistakably to the circumstances surrounding the birth of Christ in Bethlehem, the dragon referring to the Roman Empire at that time as dominated by Satan, and the attempts of Herod to destroy the baby Jesus." Once again from Walvoord's publication here on the revelation of Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, the dispensationalists like Walvoord veer from the gold and precious doctrines and fallaciously hold that the casting of the stars to the earth as a future event, as supposed at a supposed revival of the Roman Empire. Again, citing Walvoord, we quote him, "The second great sign appearing in heaven is described as a great red dragon. It's clear that the revived Roman Empire is in view. The tail of the dragon is declared to draw a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. This seems to refer to the gathering under his power of those who oppose him politically and spiritually, involving his temporary subjugation of a large portion of the earth." End of quote. Once again, citing from Walvoord and his Revelation of Jesus Christ publications. After acknowledging that the dragon represents the ancient Roman Empire and the stars, the literal descendants of Jacob, the dispensationalists changed the narrative and the chapter from the 1st century to future events and characters moving back and forth through time in the chapter without any true valid scriptural authority. We say this because their preconceptions are bereft or totally ignore the fact that the Old Testament prophecies of another wilderness experience for the covenant people of God revealed in Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 35 through 38, and a number of other passages. Consequently, the dispensationalists like Walvoord have no clear vision of the identity of the third part of the stars cast to the earth. We see this failure in identity in Denis de Souza's production of The Devil's Prophecy, where he is conned by dispensationalist doctrine. We will produce a video on this subject in the future on our show, Echoes of Tomorrow. As for the supersessionists, they hold the stars as 1/3 of the literal and rebellious descendants of Jacob at the time of the 1st century. Citing from Rogers again, we read, quote, "So in keeping with the 1/3 pattern, the dragon's tail or Roman legions killed the third part of the inhabitants in the land of Judea." He goes on, "Satan drew or cast down 1/3 of the inhabitants of the land of Judea and the surrounding areas. This is an elusive parallel to Daniel 8:10 and the prophecy of the little horn." Once again from J. Rogers and his Revelation 12 preterist perspective. Ironically, Rogers acknowledges the primary passage that tells us what the casting of the stars to the earth represents in Daniel 8, verse 10. In Daniel 8, verse 10, we read, "And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped on them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. It's Daniel's little horn that waxes great and magnifies or exalts itself to the Prince of Hosts, Christ, and casts some of the hosts and the stars down to the ground, which is precisely what we see in Revelation chapter 12. But Daniel holds the stars as the saints, not the rebellious members of the descendants of Jacob, as the Supersessionists believe. In verse 12 that we just read, the stars are given over to the little horn, which was first mentioned in the preceding chapter. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, where you read, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given unto his hand until a times, and a dividing of times." Daniel prophesied about the little horn which rises amongst 10 horns upon the fourth beast, the ancient Roman Empire, and exalts itself to Christ, the Prince of Hosts, and then casts the saints down to the ground to persecute them, described as stamping on them in Daniel. The passage in Daniel 8 is the source of the prophecy in Revelation chapter 12. And the persecution wasn't intended for the unrepentant, nor just for 1260 days, as the supersessionists claim, which makes their doctrine the part of the wood, hay, and stubble that is going to be consumed in the judgment or the fire that is upon it right now. As Marceau related, Revelation 12 describes the war between Satan and the woman over the powers and the rulers of this world against spiritual wickedness in high places on this earth, not in paradise where God dwells. John doesn't see the woman in heaven where God sits on his throne, and Satan isn't seen in heaven where God sits in Revelation chapter 12. Satan and his angels are cast out of the high places on earth when the gospel is preached to the world, and a multitude of nations cast their idols aside. And we know that the woman representing the church wins this battle for these heavenly places on earth, because the church, through Christ, cuts off the names of idols out of the land when the gospel is preached to a multitude of nations, who then cast their idols aside to worship the true God of Israel in the kingdom at hand. This, according to Zechariah 13, 1 through 2, and other scriptural passages. And we know also that when John sees the woman in heaven, he isn't conveying that it's the heaven where God's throne dwells, because flesh and blood cannot enter the kingdom where God sits upon his throne. We read this in 1 Corinthians 15:50, where it says, "Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither doth corruption inherit incorruption." Again, the stars are the saints in this age that are battling Satan and his angels for influence over the rulers of this world against spiritual wickedness in high places on this earth, not in paradise where God dwells. This is what the imagery of Revelation 12 represents. And this battle commenced with Christ's first advent and continues through this age, contrary to the wood, hay, and stubble of the supersessionist and dispensationalist doctrines. Unfortunately, today, the Laodicean church is not winning that battle, but is in a fallen condition, which shall be the subject of videos to come. But in our next video, we will build upon the identity of the dragon as the ancient Roman Empire and the significance of the 7 heads.
Thanks, Jerry. As believers and members of the body of Christ, Revelation 12's woman in the wilderness is our experience. We go through trials for our very own wilderness experience, but we know the victor and are assured of good things to come. Nevertheless, the assault of evil continues. Satan's practice is to deceive. His MO was revealed already in Genesis. He deceives and lies. So knowing this, doesn't it make the admonition in Revelation to buy gold, truth, sound doctrine, tried in fire, all the more pertinent? If you garnered truth from this study, please share and like. For more in-depth studies, we have 2 books available through Amazon, like Kingdom Come, Reevaluating the Historicist Interpretation of the Revelation, and The Four Horsemen and the Merchants of Revelation. Both our names, Jerry and Marcia Huerta, are on it. Thanks for joining.